We get less cleavage right in the front. There we go.
You are on. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Hi, people. Welcome. This is my my home studio today. We're blizzarded in, so we're not at the big studio. We're in my little bedroom. And I'm trying to figure out how to do all of this. Wait, are we live now, George?
We're live now.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yes,
Go.
I see. Okay, Twitch is on a delay, so I have Twitch open on one end.
Go ahead and mute it out too, Lauren, so we don't have the echo.
Yeah, I still learning how to do all of these.
No worries. You got some hellos from Sunset and Chill, and Cynthia says hello from MA.
Hey, Cynthia.
But go ahead and mute it out too, Lauren.
Yeah. So there we go. Does that work for everybody?
Ready to rock. Let's do this.
Perfect. Okay. Hey, team. Welcome. We're gonna jam with two props today. I'm pretty excited. It's the first time I'm running this workshop, but I've been thinking about it for a while. And the cool thing I think about it is that it works with lots of different types of props. So today I have some fans, some hoops, some buugeng, some straight staves, some silk fans, some tech fans. It'll all be different ways that we can play with it. Yeah, I think let's get started just by kind of stretching and warming up. So what we're going to do is especially get the hands warm. Let's see, I'm gonna figure out a good view. So I'm gonna have about 90-degree angles, straightening my arm in front of my shoulders and starting to stretch all the way through my fingers and then folding down. So you want that like nice and kind of like folding into it. You can kind of play. I don't know if anybody's into some tutting, but this is a nice way to kind of play with that. I've been enjoying it recently. But it's also just a really great warm up and good ways to kind of work different patterns with shapes in each hand. It's kind of weird for me to not talk to people. I'm just kind of talking at a screen, but we're gonna figure this out. Okay, so again, we're just gonna keep stretching out. And start extending towards the rest of your arms because they're all attached. Your wrists does a lot, but it comes out of your shoulders, comes out of your elbows. You wanna get some nice stretch to kind of warm up there. And I think one place on the arm that I always tell people to pay more attention to is the forearms. So you might want to just kind of tug on these muscles in here. You might want to dig in a little bit more after the workshop, but just kind of activating it, getting your arms nice and warmed up. I'm a little sore from a show I did yesterday, so we're going to go deep into this warm up today. Plus, apparently I have you for an undisclosed amount of time, so we can just make this as long as we want. Just kidding. It's probably going to be about an hour. So as we're warming up our hands, we were kind of like playing in front of us. Let's go left and right. Same idea. Play with these nice straight lines coming from your wrist, making 90-degree angles with your hands. warming up your fingers in between. Right, you can stretch them in opposite in the vertical plane. Folding, bending, tutting, getting that warm up. And part of this is also getting access to the spaces in between where your body is and where your arms are, because that's a space to kind of activate with where these props are going. So now I'm kind of moving my stretch into my shoulders, reaching out from both ends, kind of widening from the front of my shoulders. And so here's a good way to find space. So what I'm also going to do is change the direction of these stretches, right? So playing with a little bit of behind that back space with one hand and reaching up with the other. Going the other way, kind of getting used to finding that space behind you. Keeping lines straight. Ooh, okay. So if you want to get the rest of your body activated as well, you can kind of focus on your hands if you're feeling it, but getting your legs and your hips into it too. I don't know if you could hear that crack from there. Getting the arms into it. Kind of like lunging from each side. Stretching into the sides. Because one way that, again, looking at that behind the back motions, trying to find that space where that other hand can reach behind that hip. You know, and one of the ways to do it is to literally get your hip out of the way, right? So if my hip is in the way, my hand can only go so far, but if my hip's out of the way, I have this whole range of motion to play with over there. Same thing on your other hand. And if you're not sure if like going behind the back is a new thing for you, or you're saying to yourself you're not flexible, that's okay. It's not about how far you can go, it's just beginning to find that space. So one way to do that is if you just kind of like switch your hands in front of you and then just twist it a little bit more. So just moving your hands in front of you and behind you and twisting a little bit more. And then you see if you twist from just your shoulders, you have a different range than if you twist from your shoulders and your hips. Right, so you're kind of, in one hand, it's just your arms. In a second look, we're arms and chest. And the third look is arms, chest, hips. Right, so it gives you so much more space to play with. Makes sense? Any questions yet? I don't think so, but maybe we're all just kind of hanging out, getting loose. And I think it's time to pick up a prop. So I have a variety of choices. We have a set of double stabs. I have a set of S stabs, which are also double but curved. I have a pair of more technical fans. They're clear, they're kind of harder to see, but they're more similar in size than my fire fans to a lot of technical fans that I see around these days. I also have a pair of silk fans, which is a whole other grip thing. And it's a very different type of motion and way that the handle is dealt with, but a lot of the principles that we're going to talk through can apply for this too, for belly dancers and people that want to play with fabrics. And I do have hoops. They're unfortunately much larger than I would like for a tiny room like I have here, but we're going to give it a try, and hopefully your space, if you're playing with hoops, is more hoop friendly. Okay, so I have a notebook. And a plan, and so we're going to start talking through what we're going to do. So I just started talking about a few different props. You might have different ones. That's cool. If you have a different type of prop, I'm actually kind of curious if you can just type in the chat what type of props you might be trying to play with today, just so I'm curious. So I'd like to know. Let me know. If you have poi, some of this stuff will be applicable. I think it's more of an advanced poi study, whereas I think for a static prop, what we're going to do is we're going to start at an all level position. But I know for me, I'm going to be swapping props in and out and changing what I'm holding. You can pick your favorite, hang out with your favorite 2 props the entire time. Or if you also want to kind of go back and forth between what you're playing with and the different ways that the movements kind of work with those different shapes, go for it. And yeah, as you go, let me know if you have any questions. George from PLF is hanging out in the background and keeping an eye on everything, making sure that there's no technical difficulties. And he's also going to let me know if you guys have any questions, which I'd love to answer. So throw them out there. Yeah, so the goals today are really to open up the concept of transition points and finding ways to flow in between technical moves. Some of the motions that we're going to be doing will also hopefully make space for more of your technical movements. So that general idea is how we're going to be moving these props around our body and how we're going to be moving our body around those props. Because we're kind of like a third prop in this situation. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a very flat plane study. And actually, I think I can just leave my notebook here and you don't even see it.
Everything's going solid, Lauren. It looks like fans and hoops are our majority of props out there right now. Fans and hoops.
Fans and hoops? Okay, awesome. Sounds like a plan. I also want to get my water. Cool. Okay, so the interesting thing about fans and hoops, or I should say probably fans and most other props, is there's less universal direction with a fan shape than there is with a straight line or a circle. So automatically, anything that we're doing, I'm with the less expensive ones, right? Okay, so we have our fan here, and I have my hoop here, and if I hold it right in front of me, it's very clear that the fan is pointing a direction, and that the hoop is just kind of hanging in space, and I'm holding it in direction. So if I flip the hoop around, you know, I can make that technical motion into a performance motion. But at the end of that performance, I'm still pretty much the same thing. I'm still a circle right in front of me. What's different is with the fan, if I turn 180 degrees, I'm in a whole other direction. So already when we start talking about the different types of movements we can do, there's already almost double the play of opportunities in terms of changing and using transitions, because we have more of a directional approach with the visual of the fans versus either a static circle or, you know, a straight line. So with a straight staff, if I turn it 180 degrees, it's still the same picture. So my grip positioning has changed, right? I went from my palm facing down to my palm facing up, but this picture still stayed the same. Like it's still a straight line across from me. So just kind of things to think through. And if there's any buugeng people in there, there's also a bit of a different shape here because you could either be talking about holding it from the center, or you can talk about holding it from the end, and that's going to have a little bit of a different shape. And then because this is not an even shape, it will change a little bit when you flip it 180 degrees. Same thing with fans. Okay, so let's go back to fans. Get 2 of them. And let's talk about our first patterns of motion. So what I want to just start playing with is the concept of flat plane positionings, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm in my front flacing plane, and just for any beginners out there that are less familiar with the conversation around where props are and your body is, we essentially have 6 planes that we work with. We have the front plane and the back plane, which is behind me. On my left and right, I have my side planes, which are my left planes and my right planes, right? And also note that if my fans are in this position, in my side plane, if I change my body, it is now my front plane. So my fan was isolated, but my body is changing. Right, so that's kind of an opportunity we're going to be looking at. And then there's also the ceiling plane, which is right in top, and the ground plane, which, you know, could be as low as the camera wants to show. Okay, cool. So we have that part kind of talked about. What we're going to do right now is in our front plane, so like right in front of us. So we should be having pretty much like a straight arrow line with what's happening here. So now if I had 2, oops. And yeah, while I'm talking, just kind of be playing with the different motions we have here. And what I want you to start doing is start moving your body around with those motions, okay? It's okay, the ceiling fan's not on. We're gonna figure this out. Okay. So what I'm doing right now is I'm literally pushing back and forth, pretty much. And what I'm doing is I'm adjusting my body and a little bit of where my grip is for those lines, right? So if you're a beginner, maybe you want to start looking at these lines and putting in a fold, which is an easy way to kind of transfer your grip. I think the goal that I want to look at here is maybe using a different motion as a transitional opportunity, but the end shape landing in that front flat plane right in front of you in that kind of grid. And so what I want to do 2 things. So one thing is, if you are more advanced and you do want to have a little bit more of an isolation grip to your hoop, or similarly, if you have fans, you can do a grip to your fans. And then once you kind of get very comfortable in this straight line and finding a lot of variations in essentially this one straight line, start rotating it around. In that front plane, 360 degrees around, but in 90 degree or 180 degree increments, right? So that's me going, let's say this is my left side, and I can swing it to my right side, right? So I'm just kind of hanging out, finding that nice motion, trying to make the pattern follow. And so after I get comfortable with 180 degrees, kind of giving it a full 360. And this whole thing is right in front of us, right? And so maybe when we first started playing with the straight line, then I switch which hand is in which position. I'm going back to getting used to this 180 degrees. Nice and flat. So if you're practicing in a hallway, you're all good. All right. So then you can take these motions and then add more folds in, making those motions more dynamic. So now, let's see. So, and this depends if I have them stacked in front of each other or if they're in line near each other with the different kind of folds and isolations I can put on them. All right, and so all of that we were doing, that we're talking about, is pretty much moving in parallel. And so when I say parallel, that's kind of when both hands are moving in the same direction. So this is moving parallel. They're in the same position. Oops, there's the ceiling fan. Perpendicular, perpendicular with would be perpendicular with a hoop is more like having it in two different directions. It's actually harder with a hoop now that I'm really thinking about it. You always drop the expensive one. All right. So, there's the ceiling fan. That wasn't a good one. Okay. I don't know if everybody else is as concerned with knocking all their stuff over. I certainly am. I have mini hoops at my studio too. Anyway. So, okay, let's give our hands a little bit of a shakeout break. And I don't know what you have been practicing to do that, because this was just what I was kind of demoing for you. And again, just to kind of recap, we were moving very much in one plane, kind of back and forth, isolating ourselves at that nice 180-degree point in order to kind of have your full control over what shape you're making at the grid. All right, so I'm gonna change props and pick up fans again. And so now we're going to kind of study the same type of concepts, except utilizing our body into those motions a little bit more, right? Because so far what we've been doing is kind of moving it back and forth and swinging around it, you know, and we're starting to move them away from each other, which is like a little bit of a perpendicular shape. Or instead of having it in parallel in the same direction, having it in opposite direction. And play with the idea of where your hands are closer together and where your hands are farther away. And if you're more advanced, you can throw some grip changes in there and kind of give yourself some pretty patterns. And so now, as we're starting to incorporate the body movement into it, there's a few different ways to approach. So one of the ways I want to start talking is where kind of our body is in between it. So if we're swinging it in the same direction and then we swap it from opposite directions, right? So I'm kind of changing my patterns, and then I can change what direction my hand's going, whether it's in front of me or behind me. So we can start to look at different opportunities to move the body instead of just the props, right? Because a lot of people, when they focus on technique, it's very, very easy to just try to really make sure you know where your prop and your hands are. But if you can also use your body as a manipulator, it kind of opens up a whole nother line of flow opportunities and places to reach that you can't really do if you don't utilize the different shapes that can hit around your body. And so what I found is that practicing and having this 180-degree line to really kind of use as an anchor point. Like, so when you get really used to knowing where 180 degrees is, so you know how straight your arm has to be or how bent your elbow has to be to get there. It's very easy to get to the same place behind you because you already know where you're going. You just have your body in front of it, right? So if I have my straight lines here, all I did was, I don't know if you can see, all I did was even step my foot a little bit forward, which makes room for my hip. So yes, it definitely helps to have a flexibility if you're trying to reach behind your back. But again, what I'm trying to communicate is if you just step that hip out of the way by leading with your foot, you have a lot more space than you would if your body was rigid here without having to really stretch forward. So yeah, so if I was watching you right now in a real life workshop instead of in some Twitch chat format, I would want to be seeing you kind of playing with your 180-degree pivoting, pulling lines and seeing where your body can move around them. Right, so if you're a beginner, that's awesome. Maybe it's just keeping that 180-degree line and making a pirouette. Maybe it's even just turning halfway. Maybe it's folding 90 degrees with everything. You know, it's kind of weird, but if you have 3 people doing it at a time in choreography, it's gonna look cool. So there's different ways to play with the motions of your patterns to make them fun. And then the more playful you can get with it means the deeper you can go with the different opportunities. So yeah, are we still, and again, let me know, keep me posted if you guys are working on other props too. I'm kind of going mainly between hoops and fans, but I have some other things here if that helps. So for hooping, same idea. Hopefully again, you have more space. But all I'm doing is starting to really play with this 180-degree line near me. And then I'm starting to build my body into that shape. So knowing how fast to turn or slow. All right. So let's see, we are about halfway through. Do people have questions?
We just had a few people shout out actually, Lauren. Tina says she's really happy to see some basics, even though she's comfortable with a few or more of the advanced techniques, does lack some of the foundational stuff. And, you know, so just talking about the foundations being good. Got some awesomeness. And then I don't know what Stephen Warwick says he has a buugeng?
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Hey, Steve. Cool. I'll pick those up too. If you know me, you probably know they're my favorites. So I'm happy to do that.
Vogel said he's using some staves. I think he's at work and just picking up something he can spin around.
Oh, awesome. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Danny. Yeah. So here, pick up some straight straps. So the cool thing, and so how I kind of talk through the difference between the circle of the hoop and the forwards and backwards directions of the fans. The interesting thing about sticks is it's actually, in theory, it's a very boring line. Like I said, it's kind of a straight line here. But it also has an opportunity to build a lot of different shapes with the two of them that I think have a lot of cool potential, right? So I can hold them in parallel in my front planes, or I can hold them perpendicular. I'm sorry, they're still parallel, but I could hold, vertical or horizontal. There we go. And then here's perpendicular versus parallel. So they could be parallel in the same height, different heights. You know, you have a lot of different opportunities here. And you can still isolate them around. So you can have your 180-degree swings. You know, these are good kind of arm crossers. They're fun to kind of throw some isolation because then you can open up into some. I think what I really am trying to kind of help teach with this workshop here is trying to find the motions in between different technical grips so that you can flow freely between, like, okay, I know this technical move brings me to here, and then I could just do a really fun isolating line to a whole other move and then get back to some other shape that I was making here, right? So it kind of gives you more opportunities to keep going with it. And so, I mean, I'm a little partial because they're my favorite, but cool things about the shape with the buugeng too is there's so many different shapes and different movement opportunities because there's different shapes within the props itself. Right, so all I'm doing right now is the same motion, but I'm making a whole bunch of different shapes along the way. And this is me holding these in parallel, horizontal, and then I can also hold it vertical and opposite, and vertical and parallel. And like fans, you know, there's a fun dimension that can be folded with these that can be a little harder to achieve with double stabs. So like to do a similar thing with double stabs, you kind of have to play on this 3/4 pivot a little bit to give it that dimension anyway. All right, let's see what else is on my list. We are 38 minutes into it. Cool, we're doing good. So we did our left-right lines. And maybe, you know what, I didn't really communicate this extensively, but I do want to reiterate that. So we have these like horizontal lines that we were doing in front of us, but also same deal, vertical lines. And then put them all together, you have this awesome grid to play with. Right, and kind of like going into where we started with warming up where our hands are. You know, so if you have no props, but you just kind of like feeling feeling the motion, you can still utilize the direction of your palms to really communicate those motions. Ooh. Cool. Okay, so yes, so we're reiterating, you go to the sides, you also go up and down, you know, so you have like behind you and next to you. Okay, so we started to talk about isolations. Let's get a little more into it. Now, let's start talking about isolating the prop with your body around it, right? So one way that I can do that is if I'm holding my prop, you can see my fan here is in this kind of horizontal plane. So if I can isolate this completely, I don't know, can you, is it showing up well? It's clear, I'm trying to show it. Anyway, so if I just hold this in place and slowly adjust my grip around it, the fan was isolating and I'm walking all around it, right? And there's different ways you can hold it, different ways you could play with this grip. You can kind of see, because it's clear, you can kind of see the different ways I'm playing with this grip. I just kind of like have my finger hooked here, playing it around that way. If you have two, you can kind of take turns what you're moving it around. Okay, so maybe if you're just starting out to figure out how to move your body around it, you just want to concentrate at one at a time. Or maybe you're ready to kind of tackle the two. Really isolate the one and folding the second one around it. You know, maybe where you're gripping it is a little different. So maybe you want to figure out how much range you can move around in isolation. Right, so you can have kind of like a very dramatic setup. All right, so I can kind of fold my fan in, walk all the way around. Oop. That's dramatic, there you go. Nice and loud. All right. So let's see, if I had an S stab with me, if I'm walking around it, I'm going to have it vertical because it's easier for me to fit around it. But right, I can be more of a clown and also go through it, which is fun. I can't really do that with the other ones. So I'm going to start with it vertical. So same deal. I'm lining up. I kind of like the way I like looking at the linear aspect of an S staff is trying to find where that straight line from tip to tip would be. So you see it's kind of right here. I'm using this other staff to kind of demonstrate. So I guess I wonder if I can just hold the two. Yeah. So same deal. Oops. I know that it's harder. It's a little harder for me. You're gonna know if I'm not doing a good job. So I'm kind of walking around it, and the two grip is actually harder for me to move in more directions. But let's see. So if you can see my hand, I'm kind of have a very loose grip, and I'm adjusting around it. So with the hoop you can make two choices, right? You can kind of isolate it from holding it from the top or the bottom plane. So like with the giant hoop, it's a little bit harder, but just tripping on things. Trying to give you an idea. And then like rotating out of it because that grip is a little bit harder. Or you can hold it from one end and kind of move to the other, right? So this one, I mean, I'm holding one now, so it's easier for me to just kind of change around. But if I have the two props, in terms of like the folding and the isolating theories, you know, so you can push it or you can spin it. That's also a different thing with, I think, hoop that you don't have as much with the other props. I mean, you can do this with fans or staves, but you can also hold two props one hand and walk around it, although it's a little bit harder. And you see I'm kind of like cheating. I'm using it, I'm resting it on my shoulders, right? And so now this, I'm not very flexible with this, but I can also spin it around in different ways, right? So maybe my flexibility dimension isn't that strong with it, but my movement opportunity, because of the strength of my grip, can give me another motion that I can put into it. So let's see, at the other hand, because you should always do the other hand, right? I'm holding the two hoops from their center point. I can kind of choose my flexibility opportunities, right? And then maybe this begins to introduce the idea of a transition. And so this is actually, let's see, are we good on timing? Oh, we're doing great. This kind of gets into the introduction of the two in one hand, because then you can have four, but you don't have to. Two in one hand's cool too. Two's cool. How you grip it is totally going to depend on the prop. I just showed you one way to grip it with two hoops, one hand would be to grip it. The whole other story of hoop that sometimes fans can address is, you know, in theory, you can run it around your hand, keep hitting things, right? So I'm not really going to go into there. I don't have the space for it. So I'm just going to be looking at a static grip story, like playing it in just one grip. With fans, a nice transition into that. Actually, I don't personally, I have terrible fan handles designed, like they're very flat and they're meant to be held like this. This is just my personal designs. So they're not great for transitioning into two in one hand, but once I'm there, I'm okay. But if you have a set of forged creations, you should be able to really slide into that very easily. And the interesting thing about fans, it's different than, let's say, my giant hoops, or even even my double staves, is they're even a little bit smaller. These are more of my technical fans. So I can very easily find space around, versus my double staves, I'm gonna have a harder time making room behind them because they're just bigger. Cool. So we kind of talked over different kind of grip techniques for fans. For double staves, for two in one hand, in parallel, perpendicular, this is perpendicular. Perpendicular is a really nice way to kind of get a solid grip. And what I do here is I use my fingers and I place them to kind of help create the space and divide, right? So if I have 2 fingers on one side and 2 fingers on the other side, that means there's an even distribution. So it's much more likely for this to be more 90-degree parallel than, let's say, if I had like 3 fingers on one side and 1 finger on this side, then you see it's much less even. But between my 2 knuckles, it's much more constrained in this perpendicular shape. Okay, so 2 in one hand can be a lot. Please remember to switch the other hands. If you want to give yourself a cool transition, go for it. If you just need to like shake off the other hand, put in the other, that's also totally cool. And so what I want to do now is same thing that you were doing with the 2 props in one hand, is kind of looking at this 180-degree line in your front plane. And you can see, depending on how you're gripping the situation, let me see if I'm holding. So S-stabs is the same story, but you have to decide whether, oh wait, hold on, okay. We're gonna go S-stabs and we're gonna go fans. So S-stabs, same deal, fingers between, right? Same kind of situation, except the other thing about S-stabs is this is the stabs in parallel, this is the stabs in opposite. So this is also, well, this is more like 2 fingers here. So you can have these 3 different shapes with S-stabs than you can with straight stabs. So I know Steve's got that one down, so I'm gonna pick up some fans. Boom. Okay. So now all I'm gonna do is start looking at my straight lines, and where I'm getting strained and troubled, I can also look at opportunities to turn my wrists to help lead my elbows to move the shape in different directions around my body, right? Okay, so maybe what I want to do is start finding space behind me with the 2 props. And if you're not holding 4, I would still demonstrate with your empty hand, just to kind of give yourself that opportunity. So now I'm trying to like move this line in parallel. And to do this, I kind of like turn my wrists and elbows in an S way, right? And that's a different situation than if I just moved straight or if I turned them, if I literally pivot. Right, and so I didn't really change a lot of what I did, but all of those motions put your palms in a different direction, position your elbows in a different direction, and all of that can be picked apart with your other technical moves in terms of like getting really to dance with it. Okay, so we got like 5 to 10 more minutes and a couple more things I just kind of want to come back. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into isolations and start going into like body tracing conversations. But maybe let's take a break and put our props down for a minute, shake out our wrists. And if there are any questions, now's a great time. How you doing, George?
Great.
Everything's good, everybody's chilling?
Everybody's chilling, everything's great. Water is good, stay hydrated.
I'm sparkling today.
Nice.
Yeah, so I don't know how often everybody practices, if they usually do it for an hour straight without taking a break, or 2 hours, or however many hours. We always want to be nice to our wrists. Personally, my journey to flow arts was as a physical therapy, and that was with poi and a bad shoulder. So it was all about building smaller muscle groups and increasing flexibility and trying to get rid of scar tissue. So there's a lot of trying to strengthen the joint and a lot of subtle movements around that. But in that practice, I also found that there were some repetitive motions that were challenging and were hard, and I had to kind of work up to. So it's always a process. Okay, cool. So I want to introduce a little bit of body tracing, and then I kind of want to do a little bit of a cool down, and that'll be well over an hour, but I think everybody's cool and hang out. I mean, it's a blizzard here. I don't know where it is where you're taking this workshop or when you're viewing this video, but there's not much else to do tonight. So we're gonna jam a little bit. Okay, so we talked about hanging out in one plane and doing a whole bunch of different fun motions with the one plane and how the different patterns change the picture of the shape. But in actuality, we're barely changing direction, right? So what I'm going to talk about right here is a little bit of an isolation story. And what an isolation means is you're identifying a position that is not changing, and then you're changing everything else around that position, right? So we kind of talked about it earlier. We had a prop right in front of us, or I'm sorry, at one radial point of us. We isolated where that prop was, and we walked all around it, right? So that's isolating the prop and moving your body all around that. In an opposite frame, I'm keeping my body straight other than my arm and moving my staves around my body, right? And so when we're talking about the prop, we're isolating a position on the prop as well. So on this staff, for instance, there's 3 different points that are a sensible way of isolating. You can go deeper, but let's just talk about the 3 main points, right? And so that would be the top wick, that would be the center where your main grip handle might be, and then you have the bottom wick, right? And so, here come our hoops. So if I wanted to isolate around my top wick, I turn the prop all the way around, maintaining the position of that one wick. I've found that as like a tip, if you're new to isolating, that starting with eye level is a good exercise because you know where to keep it. So it might help you kind of figure out where that position is, right? And so if you can do it in one direction, it means you practice also in the other direction. Same thing. You can do it with one arm. You want to be able to do it with the other arm. And so if I wanted to do 2 at once, I could either stack them so it'll never get at each other's way. I could stack them in that front plane, so that's like, you know, stacking it here. Or I could stack behind it and change it into more parallel and make it have like a more parallel appearance, right? And so there's also 2 different ways to do that here. Here I'm kind of using an imaginary point between my 2 staves to maintain my parallel form, which is different than if you wanted to have them in parallel. Let's see, have them parallel and just go around in parallel, right? And same thing to the bottom end. So this whole time, when I went back, we were tracing from the top wick right? And like I said, holding it at eye level is a nice way to kind of position yourself somewhere. We also have the bottom one, where same story, but instead of going up towards my top wick, I'm going to twist down towards the bottom wick, right? So I can go up and down. So if I have fans, often my isolation point for fan is going to be the center of the middle spine, or if you have like a 4 spine or more, or if there's an even number, then kind of like in between the top two. So basically the top point is your isolation point. And so this is isolating it in parallel. And so like, let's see, can I do it? Here is an opposite. No, that's not isolating it. Maybe I can't do it like that. But you can definitely go and keeping it in flat plane, going perpendicular. You know, and then from these isolations, you can easily expand and contract into different segments around that. You know, so if I was opposite in my left and right plane, I could go, let's see, actually I should be closer. So we're here, I can go like that. Kind of harder to see and clear. All right. And then I just want to do that quick intro into body tracing with fans. What I'm doing is I'm tracing it in front and behind my body. And so if I'm standing parallel to the camera or perpendicular to the camera, it's the same type of motion. And your grip might be different. There might be like, you might be more like this, which is fine. It's still that kind of figure 8, which is that weave to your side, if you can do your weave. Right, and so what I'm doing is I'm starting from behind my head and folding it around my body, letting one wick or one end lead around the tracing. And so the whole time that I'm doing this, I don't know if you see how much my elbow is associating with this motion. Right, so it's leading around my head, it's leading to pull over my side, it's leading to pull over my shoulder. Your elbow help leads a lot. The closer your elbows are to your body, the tighter that tracing is going to be. So let's see. With double stabs, well, double stabs is cool too because you can change the dimension. Because it's such a straight line, you can play with the dimensions around the shapes too. And so now I'm just kind of jamming around. I'm letting my elbows lead. And I'm kind of playing with the idea of trying to make those horizontals and those perpendicular shapes in my planes, except keeping the plane as tight to the body as possible, and then using that as transition points to also come back out. So again, my elbows and actually my wrists too are very close to my body when I'm doing body tracers, which kind of makes sense, right? Because you're tracing the prop around your body, right? So for this beginner move, let's even taking it with hoops. I've been throwing the hoops. Right, I'm changing my dimension. It's kind of weaving out, and I'm folding it around. This is bigger than I want to be doing. Wish I had made here. So there we go. You see, I'm isolating my grip and moving my circle around my grip point and not breaking my ceiling fan. Maybe mildly breaking my ceiling fan. So yeah, going back to the cool, I think that this is actually technically called something else. I'm really bad with technical terminology. But playing with the dimensions of either keeping it straight and moving it perpendicularly, or you can keep it moving it in parallel by inserting and exiting, by inserting the props around your body, in between your body, and exiting the space around it. You have a lot more of a dynamic movement pattern. All right, so we're about an hour 10 in. I think I'm gonna start cooling us down, cooling our wrists and our hands down. Unless anybody has any questions, now's a good time to throw that down. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do kind of a slow cool down. I'm gonna play with my double grip a little bit. And so let's say you're first getting used to it, you know, right? Just kind of learning what perpendicular means. And then if you get really comfortable with finding that perpendicular position, maybe play with it a little bit more, figure out what it feels like to do more of a narrower cross. If you're feeling even more advanced, you can start either turning one around the other, figuring out that one, or trying to rotate them both, right? And then so while I'm practicing or holding the space in the one hand, I'm kind of starting to shake my other out. I'm loosening up, especially like what I'm finding is that this line here in my line is really tight. So I'm going to be stretching this out a little bit and still kind of cooling down my other wrist. What I want to do now is like, so I wanted you to warm up to get your hands and your wrists ready. At this cool down, I want to have a deeper study with how much stretch I can really put in there, right? So I can hold my hand open or I can reach with my hand open, right? And I can do that one finger at a time, stretching all around. Really want to give it some love. I don't know if you can hear my cracks, but that's okay. You probably don't want to. Moving my fingers down. You know, this is also concentrating the motions of both hands. It's a fun practice. All right. So now I'm going to do a little more of a deeper stretch down. So I'm holding my arm straight out from my shoulder and then bending right at the top of my wrist. And I'm just going to be really nice to the top of my wrist, and like right here, kind of in the middle of the palm. The straighter the line is, the better. And I'm just going to pull it a little bit extra. I'm going to pull my pinky up a little bit extra. I'm going to do it with the other hand. All right, so like nice and parallel. Ooh, this one feels even tighter. And I'm kind of pushing in right at the top of my middle knuckle. So I'm feeling the strain, but I'm not hurting myself. You should still be able to kind of move all your digits. I want to push this down a little bit. And then I want to stretch out this line. So I'm going to fold and pull my thumb out a little bit. I have very loose joints, so I try to not push this too far. You know, so the more, I personally think the more open your grip can be, just the more space you have to hold and let go of things, right? Because half of prop manipulation is letting them go and picking them back up again. And remember we talked about this point in our forearms. And really, honestly, anybody I've ever talked to has appreciated these massage points. So this is cool because you can do it to yourself. Even better if you can get a buddy to do it for you or pay a professional. But especially if you're a prop manipulator, your muscles here leading up to the elbow are going to be really tight. So you want to give that a really nice, massage in. Let it go. And I'm going to start to twist my shoulders into it too, because again, the more flexible my shoulders are, my hips are, the more space I can work with it. I find if I train really hard, it almost makes my shoulders tighter and I have less room behind my back. So it's kind of a tiptoe around the line. Because, you know, in theory, I've been doing behind, like, let's say with poi, I do behind the back weaves and 3-beat, 5-beat, whatever, no problem. But sometimes if I'm training really hard, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, actually, I can't reach there. So I really want to kind of concentrate on being able to reach back. So one stretch I like is changing how you're opening your shoulders up, whether you're bringing your palms together and pushing. So pushing your palms together here, you should feel a strain all the way down the sides of your chest and on the outside of your arms. So pushing hard there, and then opening up for your shoulders. So mine go this far, yours might not go that far, that's okay. I have very flexible shoulders. And maybe you want to reach them up. Maybe you want to reach them down. I like making little circles. You should feel a little bit of a strain. It's hard to hold your arms out like this. It's good. Working them out a little bit. I'm just making my circles bigger. I'm shaking them out. And we're gonna move our chests a little bit, and we're twisting a little bit in the middle from both ends. So you wanna give yourself, you wanna keep a center point in your body. So right now I have my arms on my hips, kind of give myself a base because I'm trying not to push myself too hard. If this isn't enough for you, you can open up your arms. Try to reach deeper with that. And as we're doing this exercise, remember the difference between moving your hips or not, right? So right now, my hips are very static, and I'm just moving my upper body. And you see how far my arms can go. I'm trying to keep them parallel as a measure. But if I get my hips into it, so next one I'm gonna get my hip into it, I can go even farther. I have much more of a twist without having to re-step, right? And so now a pirouette, you can either keep turning in a circle with moving your feet, or you can like pirouette on one point of your foot. What I'm talking about here is stretching with how far you can move without changing your step. And that's just I find that as just a perpetual exercise that I'm doing when I'm warming up and trying to see how deep in that space I can go. Yeah, so that kind of summarizes our workshop today. We've hung out for about an hour 15. I'm open to hearing any questions. If somebody is looking for advice for something specifically. Otherwise, we can kind of wrap up our workshop today with many, many, many thanks to the Party Liberation Front, which is, it's a really special art collective, and they've put together what I'm referring to as a pandemic classic workshop series, where twice a month they would host either a flow workshop or a music workshop or how to stream workshop with tons of different topics. If you haven't seen them yet, dig into the catalog. They have it archived in their virtual catalogs. We have an extra special thanks to George for being our tech help today. And Emily was organizing everything, and she was communicating me and scheduling it around. I believe this is the last one of 2020, which is good. This year is ready to be done. So I'm thrilled to experience that with you today, and looking forward to seeing what we're going to learn in 2021.
Woo, thank you. Nice job.
Yeah. Thanks, George. Likewise.
Cool. I'm going to turn up the tunes and we'll get out of here.
All right. Sounds good.
Awesome.
Is that it? Am I off camera?